This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and in each episode I will invite an expert guest to discuss a topic or subject that will enhance your knowledge and hopefully inspire you on your leadership journey. If managing people is becoming your biggest headache, then check out the How to Lead Your Team with Confidence course and join the next group program starting soon. So let's see who's in the hot seat today. Today I'm talking to John Williams. John is currently the CEO and co-founder of Red Dot 365, an organisation that approached mental health and well-being via evidence and people. The unique platform that has been purpose-built for mental health and well-being using cutting-edge technology and modern techniques around AI, machine learning and data analysis. The information, data and trends enable organisations to focus on people, understand how people feel, their levels of motivation, the goals and their barriers. It allows dialogue and conversation to take place, building trust, transparency and giving people a voice. The aim is to create a well-being culture within organisations that permeate every facet of the company from top to bottom. Their approach is to empower people and organisations to become the owners of the solution that work for them by providing the data and intelligence, measuring and tracking impact, as well as return on investment. John has over 30 years experience as an executive in FTSE 100 organisations, bringing that commercial edge and getting the right balance between social and commercial objectives. I hope you enjoy this chat we had about employee wellbeing, and I'll catch you all on the other side. John, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm delighted to be on here.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation for many reasons, because employee well-being is essential, as we know. But I think with what you do, it gives us a way to sort of look into it in a way that allows people to comfortably look at their personal well-being without feeling that they're, feeling embarrassed or whatever it is. But before we get into that, I always ask my guests, why do you do what you do? What was the pivotal moment that took you down this path?
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'm delighted, like I said, delighted to be on the podcast. That's a really good question. I think that your journey in life, you arrive at a certain point. I was lucky enough to work in professional sport and understood that the performance of the people's performance is determined upon the environment that you create for them. And I think that aligns itself to the world of employment as well. If you create the right environment, then it allows people to flourish and grow. And how do you do that if you don't really understand what people are looking for? So how we arrived at this point was that it's almost an amalgamation of thoughts and ideas. My background was, as I said, in professional sport. Then I went into commercial contracting, looking after welfare, justice, and mental health, and recognized the key to providing the right solutions is to be data, evidence, and data. So I tied up with a work colleague of mine, and the other work colleague is a doctor of artificial intelligence, big data, which is nowhere to be seen in the well-being space. So we think we're quite unique in terms of providing that baseline evidence, if you like, and allowing people to look at mental health and well-being in a different way. And we think we know that we're in the well-being and mental health conversation has probably been exacerbated by the current situation regarding COVID-19 and the impact on employment and welfare and every other part of people's lives.
Absolutely, and there's an awful lot going on, which I see, and hopefully others are seeing within the well-being space. But the question was always, but what is it we actually need to do, and how are actually our people feeling? How do we check in with that? And what you do, John, is and that's the reason why I wanted to get you on here to talk about it, is actually you identify what is happening for individuals, so that the company then can lend some support. And that's basically where you fit in. You have a tool which allows that to happen. I think it'd be worthwhile just explaining how that works.
Yeah, Mark, and I think that our starting point was that if you look at the wellbeing market, the wellbeing conversation, as I said earlier, is an easy one to have in the current climate. However, the wellbeing market is so broad and, if you like, a bit fragmented. So under the wellbeing umbrella, everything comes under it, from yoga to Pilates to mindfulness to Hinduism, Buddhism, well, everything. And every one of those work in the right environment and in the right circumstances. However, where do you start? And that's where we're probably at. So I got £1,000 to spend. I'm a company that wants to look after the well-being of my people. And I think and every company we work with has that intention. Where do they start? And that's the big question. If I'm going to spend £1,000, I'm going to spend £5,000. How do I know the impact I'm going to have? How do I measure what people's real concerns are or demands are? And if we can do that, and that's what we do, then we analyze that data, look at trends within your business. The more data we have, the more information we collect, the more intelligence we can provide that allows for you to target, if you like, target your investment to make the biggest impact, and then allow us to measure the impact for the individual and for the company. And that really is what we do is through an initial baseline survey in 4 areas: your mental health, your physical health, your professional well-being, and your personal well-being. We can then look at giving you an individual score as a person and track your progress over time. We then aggregate that up into a company well-being score that will allow us to look at job roles, sectors, divisions within your business, so that we can really gain some intelligence and move. And I think that's a real goal here, Mark, is to move mental health and well-being from an operational function into a strategic pillar that it sits right at the top table. Because everything we do, we have data on sales and input and throughput and drop-off rate, and we are the same as production, but we have none of that intel and insight into people. And that's where I think we can add real value.
Yeah, and I think in our previous conversation, you people might be thinking, well, some people might not want to share that sort of information, but your system actually keeps it anonymous for the business, so they don't really know where that's coming from. They just know the overall. But for the individual, they're getting some actual good suggestions as to how, if something's come up that they're struggling with, there's some suggestions straight away as to things that they can do.
Yeah. And I think that's a key, Mark, is that to get buy-in, for people to buy into this, you have to, first of all, guarantee, I believe, and we believe, guarantee the anonymity, confidentiality. Why do we believe it? Because the minute we stand up in front of employees and we tell them that the data comes to us and not to the line manager, so the next question, the follow-on question is, so it doesn't go to my line manager or my supervisor. No, it comes to us and we report it at an aggregate level to protect anonymity, confidentiality. Wow. So I can say whatever I want to, absolutely. And we get an 85% engagement rate, which is phenomenal at a survey level because of our independence. We report that at an aggregate level, with the idea being, Mark, that data then within the wellbeing dashboard allows for dialogue. It opens up dialogue. It's not a solution, but by sharing that data with a senior management team or with the staff, it allows us an insight into what are the things that they'd like to see happen. They may not have, and some of them are no cost whatsoever, real simple solutions. But you would never thought of those solutions unless you had that data. Some of them may take some investment, and some may be over time. So it allows for the conversation to take place at the right level, Mark.
Yeah, and you're pinpointing exactly what it is that people want, and it's very similar to the work I do with motivation. Is that once you can actually pinpoint and get that data, and you know what's important to someone, you can then target it and use the money. Which, let's face it, limited resources are always a problem for businesses. It's actually targeting and use that money effectively for where it's really needed, rather than just a scattergun. We'll do this and hopefully it might be okay, and it might make a difference. Whereas your system allows that pinpointing and allows that money to be spent far more wisely.
Yes, I had a great example this week, Mark. Actually, I had done some work with a client who their description of their workforce was that they attract, if you like, minimum wage employees, and they have done nothing in the mental health and wellbeing space since the company was born, and they have a fragmented workforce because some were furloughed and some weren't. So they got the unfurloughed ones disillusioned because of the furloughed ones. And where do they start? And they said, "Oh, we think we're going to employ we're going to commission a mental health first aid course." And I said, "Okay, why? Do the employees need it? Do you think that they think that's a priority?" We don't know. So if you're the employee, what's the impact? How do you know you can measure impact? Has it an impact on your employees' well-being? And does it do anything for your culture? The culture of the organization? No, I'm not saying mental health first aid may be the answer, but I think there's a bit of work to be done before you arrive at that solution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, too right. It does. I mean, there's a lot of that going on, isn't there? And like I say, it's a positive thing, but it's not really targeted, is it? And it's having that target and making sure that you're spending the money in the right place so that you get the biggest benefit for the workforce. Yes. And I just think that's so important. But what we were talking just before we started recording about, and I'm sure this must come up a lot in certain sectors, it's the difference between men and women. And I don't like stereotyping, but I think from my experience, men are typically less happy to share things and find out more stuff about themselves, where women are a little bit more happy to sort of divulge and think things that they deal with things in maybe a more open way. Is that your experience?
Absolutely, Mike. Some really good examples, actually. In the construction space, we find that it is predominantly 95% is very gender specific. It's very driven by men. And the engagement rate that in the construction space is very low. Another great example is we've done some work with a train organization, the national train organization, who gave or committed to £500 per individual to look after their mental health and well-being. The take-up rate of the individual to access the £500 was almost 15%. Only 15% they ever took it up, and of the £500, they only ever use on average about 120 quid, £120 of that. And you sort of ask the question why, and you look at the process, and they have to first of all dial up HR to say, "I want to access that money." Secondly, they have to provide the receipts to HR for the money. So then people, especially men, get really reluctant about sharing that personal information. They see it as a weakness, and that's a societal challenge as well. Whereas our system allowed them to, on their phone, to log in 24/7, 365 days a year, update their wellbeing profile, see a therapist if they wanted to see one within 48 hours, and meet without picking up a phone to anybody. So that it allowed them to access gym or physical membership. So it allowed us to inform the dashboard for the senior management team within Rail to say, right, we now got some real insightful data to be able to really push the right resources in the right area, in the right sectors, for the right people, without whilst keeping, I suppose, their confidentiality and anonymity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking about the costs of this, not the costs of, in using your system, but really the costs of, poor employee well-being and what that actually adds up to. Have you got any sort of stats and figures around that?
I think that even so the last big study was by Deloitte on a national basis, and they reckon that the actual cost of business is £144 billion a year in the UK. And they break that down further in terms of the mental health cost is something like 44 billion a year. The presenteeism cost is 60 billion a year. The absenteeism costs make up the rest of that breakdown. So it becomes and even they're saying within each workforce, at least 1 in 4 of your employees will suffer a mental health episode throughout their working life. So, and that bears out in terms of our statistics and data. On average, we recognise that every survey we do with an organisation, it runs at about 3 to 5% at any given time that people within the organisation are suffering a mental health issue, or going through the transition, or having a real impact in terms of relationships. So if they have those things going on in life, then the presenteeism impact is going to be even greater, or absenteeism.
Yeah. And your system, so you mentioned about the 365, 24/7 sort of setup. And I think, again, when we talked before, I thought the really good thing about it is that it's not about just doing it once and then, basing everything based on that snapshot. Your system actually encourages people to update on a regular basis. So if they're feeling better or less, or worse, you get a pattern of how things are developing as well. Is that right? Did I depict that as?
So I think, Mark, even every one of us in life, there's lots of things going on at any one time. You have your own relationships going on with people that are currently working from home. They have the pressures of bringing up their children at the same time, homeschooling, productivity at work, relationships. There's a huge amount going on, and at any one day, somebody can log in tomorrow and say, all my well-being needs are being catered for. My mental health is really good. I'm in a good place. My physical well-being is good. And then they get thrown a curveball in life. Something happens in the relationship, something happens in the family, the relationship at work has turned sour. So as that curveball happens, things take a turn for the worse, and can be a trigger. It can be a financial trigger, it can be a debt trigger. They can log into their own profile, which is secure, 24/7, 365 days a year, and update their own wellbeing profile. That will give them an individual score. So over time, if they logged in 5 times over the last month or 5 times over the last year, they can track back the 5 scores and shows on a graph how much they've improved, how much they've regressed, and it allows them to learn about themselves as well. What's working for me? What's not working? That data then feeds into the company wellbeing dashboard at an aggregate level. We also aggregate those scores up to be able to give a company score. So the company can say, do you know what, we've invested in this area, and we can see the impact that's having in terms of our overall score as a company. So the company starts to learn as well. So it becomes a real powerful tool. What's working for this organization at this moment in time, what's not. And as things change, or you've made a change, you've made some redundancies, you've changed management, you've changed building, you can track the impact that's had on individuals. So it becomes really powerful. The powerful part for me, Mark, is the learning piece. That they're constantly learning about themselves as a company, and the individuals learn about what works for them as an individual.
Yeah, and for me, the two things that come out for me is that if you're in a senior role within that business, it gives you some peace of mind that you are, monitoring it. You've got something in place that actually is showing that you have got a part of your culture is that you are wanting to make sure that your workforce are being looked after and their well-being is important. For one, that would, if I was in that position, I would make me feel happier that was in place, and it's not like, hope they are, or hope things are okay. That's all well and being, but actually, you need to have something to say, well, which actually is okay because we can measure it. And the other thing is actually it sends out that message that, part of our culture is our people and their well-being. And I think that's really powerful in that, we're not just, it's not something that's just listed and we talk about now and again. It's actually something that we encourage you to do. Check in with yourself. And it makes it something that people do, I guess. I mean, do you know the sort of, with these things, you never get 100% take up, but do you know the sort of percentage sort of take up you get from an average sort of business?
Yeah. So like I said, we get 85% engagement rate to start off with. We share that data at an aggregate level with every employee in the business and the senior management team. So everybody can see, wow, what's the wow factor is. They can see what the needs of the business are and what the SMT or themselves have put in place to provide a solution. So let me just give you some examples. So for instance, there was an office building with 45 employees in. 15% of the employees wanted to improve their physical well-being. But of the 15%, I'd take a walking group at lunchtime, cost no money. And they created it themselves because it was the data pointed in that direction. However, on some strategic stuff, we employ wellbeing gurus because there's no way in the world that we can provide every aspect. So we partner with and collaborate with people like yourself who provide an alternative. If the data is pointing in that direction, they can provide the solution. And that keeps people engaged. That keeps people going back in and seeing if they made some changes, how it's made them feel, because they've gone in and retook the survey in 2 months' time after they made some change. And that's keeping people wanting to go back in and update. It's almost like a Facebook page. You go back in and you can see, wow, if I change that now because I tried that and that didn't work. And so I think it keeps people engaged in their own on taking control of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem.
Yeah, and there's nothing more important than and that keeps you on track is feedback. Yes. I've shared a few times about the reason why I keep doing my sort of exercise regime. It's because I wear a belt and it gives me feedback. It tells me, it just gives me a check-in with, I might have been, even if I've got worse, at least it sort of gives you that feedback to say, what have I done? What do I need to do? I need to up my game. It just keeps you on track. And it's such important to have that feedback in many ways. And that's what we're getting here, isn't it? You're giving feedback, which then you can take some action around. That's the important thing. Yes.
And as a group of people, then it doesn't become the SMT's role to make the changes. It becomes all of our collective role to become part of the solution. So if we want to be a better environment, then we can all create a better environment by recognizing the things that people are seeing as their challenge. How can we overcome that challenge? How can we address the culture within the organization regarding mental health, or how do we approach that in a different way? Then it becomes an easy conversation. The conversation opens up to everybody. And I think that's the really important part, that it's a constant live piece of kit that they can almost run a report on a weekly or daily basis. That'll give them information and insights into what's working in the organization, our management team, right? Because whatever we believe is happening at SMT, and that's what we find, Mark. The SMT have one view of the world from their perspective, But the real perspective in terms of the ground floor, the shop floor, is a million miles apart. And I think the magic is in that gap.
Yeah, and it's very important what you said there about the responsibility that the SMT take. If they're not experts in this, it's quite a burden in some ways. But when you've got something that actually can give you the actual picture of what's going on, and we've got to remember also that sometimes the business is a business. And there will be times when, particularly at the moment, where the financial impact of that on that business is obviously a big concern, and there's be some big decisions to be made. And when it comes to employee well-being, although it might be something that we talk about, it's quite easy to forget about it. Whereas when you've got something like this, which is in the background all the time, it's been taken care of. And if there's something that's going in the wrong direction, it's going to be flagged up.
I think that's spot on, Mark. When you think about, and I'll take it back to the analogy of sport, when you put a team on the field, technically, everybody is about the same. 99% of what they do is about the same. The difference is how the environment has made them feel. How it makes so the productivity and the performance becomes second to none. It becomes really top drawer. There's nothing different in terms of technically and tactically, but it's the environment you've created through the data that's allowed you to have those conversations and show people you care. And I think that's the key.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering whether you get people that are quite happy to share, their scores. Is that something you see where people are open? Because there's bound to be some people that do that.
And I think that Mark is that's a really good question. Actually, I think that's our intent is to create a well-being community, a community around people sharing what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And I think that's our next move on, is that people can log in and create chat rooms and create sharing ideas and solutions that work for them as people, as individuals and organizations. And I think we're in a really good space when we get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good sign when people are openly just discussing around where their score is, where it's up and down, all those sort of things. When people start sharing, and I think, that's when it opens up to a point where it's just okay to talk about this stuff. And that's where we want to be, isn't it, with everything? Just be open about it, be honest about it. There's no judgment being made here. We all have our well-being to take care of, whether it's physical, mental, all the other things that make up our well-being. It's just having the conversation, and it's just a healthy thing to do. I just think it's just a great idea. Sadly, John, our time's running out, and as I mentioned before we started recording, I tend to leave our listeners with some top tips. What was your ideas around, some top tips about well-being in the workplace be?
So I think my first one, Mark, is, and I think that's the overall aim, is to move well-being and mental health from an operational function that sits with HR and usually at the bottom of the training budget, to a strategic pillar within the organization, a key focus that everybody drives towards based on that data and intelligence. And it's an open dialogue, like you just said, it's an open dialogue, it's open discussion, it becomes transparent, and it becomes easy for everybody to comment on because the transparency is driving a positive environment. Tip 2, I think, is standards and quality, Mark. So the well-being market is a very fragmented one. And there's some excellent provision out there. I'm not knocking the provision of the companies that deliver it. But we have to have some standardization in terms of quality and compliance. Some way of getting a national consumer satisfaction rating, so that it takes it to another level. So that if somebody's going in and doing, and we've broken somebody going to do a session on mental health, then how did you rate that? What are qualifications they require? What standard are we looking for? those type of things, until we get to that place, it will remain a very fragmented market without any standards of quality. And for me, the final one, Mark, is if you can't measure it, guys, then you can't look at improvement, you can't look at learning, you can't look at return on investment, and you can't target where your requirements are. So that's my final top tip, Mark, is it has to be measured. And if you've commissioned a piece of work, or a training plan or a training piece of kit, if you like, then if you can't measure, then I question the validity in the first place. Why did you need it? How do you know? And that's my third tip.
That's a great tip to end on, John. And that is pretty much the reason why I wanted to get you on to talk about this, because once you can measure something, you can then do something about it. Businesses are all about measuring stuff. They want to measure profitability and all the other things that they measure. But, being able to measure how your employees are feeling is such an important thing, and it's good in many ways in business terms. So thank you very much for your time today, John. It's been fascinating, and I hope to catch up with you very, very soon.
Mark, thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat about wellbeing and mental health. It's a really important subject, and there's some great questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, please take the time to leave a review on your chosen platform and share on social media. Don't forget to check out the Reluctant Leader Academy, where you'll find a free 15 questions every manager should be asking themselves checklist that you can download to keep you on track every day. Leadership is a choice. When you understand the right mindset, know the process to follow, and use key skills to keep things moving forward, you'll be on track to leave a lasting legacy. Until next time, be the best you can be and the inspiration for others to follow.